Hello and welcome everyone back to the return of the show. I am Ben and I'm here with my co-host Alex, and today we are talking about The Last of Us Season 1, Episode 8, When We Are in Need. Alex, this one was again quite a doozy, and unlike other even episode numbers, we felt a lot of things, just not tears.
100%. Yeah, not a lot of tears in this one. I think a lot of people who've played the game were very excited for this episode in particular, and I think they really delivered.
It's funny because I have been seeing things of like, wow, I can't wait to see David, and I can't wait to see his face get rearranged with a machete, and I'm like, what's gonna happen? And then like I'm watching the episode of like, I'm not gonna lie. This episode had my jaw on the floor by the end of it. I was not expecting Ellie to have to kill him. I was so hoping that she would get saved, but like as they said in the post show, she wasn't saved physically, she was saved emotionally by Joel. And this episode is honestly, I think, probably one of my favorites. It wasn't gripping all the way through in the same way that others have been. It was such a good slow burn, but the payoff was incredible.
Yeah, I would have to agree. It really kind of underscores a theme that I think is present in most like post-apocalyptic shows, which is that almost no matter like what has happened or what, large circumstances they're dealing with, the worst thing they're going to come across are other human beings. Because unfortunately, that just feels like what would be the reality. It's scary. This episode kind of reminded me a little bit of, there's this movie called It Comes at Night. It's kind of like a zombie movie, but it just kind of is a very slow burn that delves into that theme of like, this like catastrophic thing changing you and changing your humanity. Highly recommend that movie. It's great. It's one of Riley Keough's earlier movies, and there's actually a lot of stars in it. But yeah, that just like humans are really the worst thing that could ever happen to you, no matter the situation.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like, I feel like The Last of Us has done a really good job doing this, and these episodes have just been incredible. Now, real quick, before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this episode, I just want to say we've been paying attention to the podcast analytics, and we know that there's quite a bit more of you. So I'm going to say something that we haven't been really pushing, but please, if you're a new listener and you like what you are hearing, go ahead and leave us a review on either Spotify or Apple. It really helps new people find the show, and it's really important for growing a podcast like this. But anyway, back to what we're doing here. One
more thing, too. We'd love to hear what else you would like us to talk about. If there's a show or a movie you want to have a conversation about, let us know that, too.
Oh, yeah, we got a couple things going. Oh, I have to address another thing for our audience on YouTube. We will be covering the new Attack on Titan episode. Currently, we are waiting for a couple things to happen within people's personal lives to free up the actual recording time for that to happen, but it will be coming shortly. Anyway, yes, back to The Last of Us. We got a whole cult to talk about here, and they're not doing well. It is not a well-run cult.
I think it's pretty safe to say, like, this is not Christianity in pretty much any way we currently know it to be. This is just somebody using the ruse of Christianity to create a cult of personality around themselves.
Yeah, they do deal with a lot of the body of Christ, though, if you think about it. But that's the
somebody suggested on Reddit, they were like, they should have named this episode "The Taste of Us."
Yeah, no, it's this episode was gross. I will say the hints of cannibalism and how they got there were very subtle. Like at the beginning, it's just this kind of thing of like, oh, we're starving. How much rations do we have? And it's like, not enough. And then suddenly there's meat being served, but you think it's the venison that they got from Ellie. But then the venison that they got from Ellie goes through the door after everyone's already served the meat. And I didn't.
Yeah.
I was just like, ooh, did they just have venison in stock? Why did they put so much emphasis on this? Nah.
Yeah, and you know what the grossest part was? That they like didn't even sear that shit off. They just stuck it into the liquid.
They boiled it.
There was such a lack of seasoning. Like, sorry, but salt and pepper don't expire. Like, can we like? You can sear the meat off. Jesus. Yeah. It was there. Oh, and then because you would think a larger animal like a deer or something, you get cuts of meat. You're used to butchering it into certain parts. So when they come out and it's just kind of like cubes.
Yeah, it's minced
and then
meat.
the cook was like, "What is this?" Bitch, you already know what this is.
Yeah.
And the guy gives them, I was like, the toot, it's venison. Like,
ugh. And also, like, there's another very subtle hint very earlier on, of course, of like, we're not going to bury your dad until spring. And I'm like, what do you think's going to happen when spring comes around and you don't have a body? Like, I don't think that's going to work the way you think it's going to work, buddy. But yeah, the entire cult is like, it's so strange because I feel like we're being shown this community that is doing really, really poorly. And meanwhile, we know that just days away in pretty much the same climate habitat, there's Jackson.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, yes, you're in like the north like mid part of the US. It's going to be a pretty brutal winter. But it's clear that a community can thrive. Obviously, indigenous people had done it for literally ever, but like people can survive in this climate if you are well prepared. But this community, it seems like, has not been thriving since the beginning.
Yeah, and honestly, it really comes back down to David on all this.
100%.
And I will say, when I heard that this was going to be a cult episode, I was expecting more of the this show doesn't want to be horror, I will say. Because I was expecting cult horror to a certain level, which is everyone's kind of really indoctrinated, everyone's really in it. But it clearly becomes that this cult is not running well, and it is not running through the way that you would normally anticipate a cult to stereotypically be run, where everyone's sort of brainwashed, everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid, and you're seeing that everyone's ride or die with this. It becomes much more clear that David has built this around himself, and he's ruling specifically out of fear, miscommunication, and violence.
Yeah, I mean, I think they did a really good job of like, at the beginning of the episode, we kind of have the like church mass scene, and then we have his interaction with Ellie when they find the deer, and he really does a good job. I mean, huge shout out to Scott Shepherd. That was amazing casting and acting on his part. But he does a great job of kind of coming off as what he wants to come off as, which is, how every predator is, like charismatic, very warm, like comforting. Like he has an idea of what he's like.
Yeah.
And then you have the scene where they get back and he smacks a little girl across the face with gloves. And you're like, okay,
now
that's interesting. Like seems a little fucked up.
And then extends a hand out to her. It's the classic, like, I'm going to show you violence, but then I'm going to show you care right after.
Yes, 100%.
There is a name for that. That's adjacent.
Cycle of abuse?
It's adjacent to love bombing. There is a term for it that I cannot remember. If Ashara happens to be listening to this from the Melanin Muses podcast, I would very much like the name of that in the comments. Also, shout out Ashara from the Melanin Muses podcast. But the actual sort of cycle that he ingrains with this, also the way that he treats her, I feel like is a strange foreshadowing of the is sort of the pedophilia, but more or less the child abuse that we're going to see going forward. Because it seems like the person that they picked to be the main piece of conflict within his own cult, at least right in the beginning, is this little girl. which
Yeah,
foils
and
directly to what Ellie's going to be experiencing.
I think it's it took me a second to remember this. Like, when they're having that scene with Mass, her dad has been dead for like maybe 2 days. Like, he literally just died. So the like lack of compassion is astounding.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
like she's like in shock still.
yeah, and I think like his whole thing is like he comes off soft in the beginning, and he's going to show you this soft side when it pleases him, but otherwise he's going to show you this violence. And also the fact that not everyone's on the same page about things. Like, they weren't open with the cult about the fact that they are eating people, which makes me really happy that the entire cult didn't just get killed by Joel. It was only the people that seemingly were in his inner circle, because it's this idea of miscommunication and keeping people in the
Yeah,
dark so
and
they
I
don't have
mean,
other options.
look, I'm not going to say there isn't an argument for if you have a bunch of people starving and somebody who is otherwise healthy died. I'm not going to say that's not like a tough call to be like, should we eat this person? Like, just look at what was that? The like plane crash with the soccer team in the Andes.
Oh God, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, look, I'll put this out there for any future, if I die and you're starving, like, just go ahead, have like, grab a leg, have a munch. Like, that's fine. I'm dead. But it obviously seems like it's not just the one guy who died. Obviously, we see like bodies hanging upside down later. So, and of course, it's going to develop from there as like that's a form of punishment. Like, okay, well, you're stepping out of line. Well, we're just going to use you for food.
Yeah.
Besides it being like, obviously,
And
so horrific.
But like for me, I think like one of the main things here is like this isn't a cult in the way that you'd expect it to be of like devotion, because you can clearly see his men sort of like wanting to step out of line, and they want to get away with shit behind his back very
Yeah,
clearly.
of course, because they're not talking about is that Ellie and Joel got straight up attacked. Like, it's not like they picked a fight with these people. And I think that kind of just shows that the group is not doing well. They're all starving. They're all, I would say that's not very Christianly to just go out and start attacking people.
Eat thy neighbor. That is part of the scripture.
Yeah, exactly. And it is, so we see David and he tries to project this like, we can take care of you, like blah, blah, blah. But when the people who he is leading go out for supplies, they're like animals. They're willing to attack anyone to survive. I'm not completely passing judgment on them, but it's not in line with what he is trying to project. He's trying to project like they're thriving like Jackson, and the reality is they're days from starving and turning on each other.
Yeah, I mean, they are the Raiders. This is what the Raiders look like. And I feel like this is something that anyone that's played Fallout and has gone through like a couple of the quest lines, especially in Fallout 3, this is like very in line with some post-apocalyptic thinking of you just end up with cannibals and communities kind of like this that aren't doing well. And I feel like it's a very, I don't want to say it's a trope of post-apocalyptic fiction, even though it probably is, but I think it's a very good thought experiment of like, what does a good community look like? The answer is, in this case, communist, and a bad community in this case looks like a cult of personality that is basically just a house of cards. I mean, his entire orders were do not kill Ellie, and they're like, let's get it done before he's here. And then he shows up, he fires a warning shot, and they're afraid of him. Like, they could have turned on him in that moment.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It just happens so often in this episode where it's like he has his idea of what is happening, and then there's reality, and they're not really mixing. It also, I mean, just to get into like the idea that before cordyceps, he was a teacher and, she makes that joke of like teacher to preacher, what, because they rhyme? And it's like, no, because they're both in a position of power where you can take advantage of people because you're able to position yourself as, oh, like you can lend an ear to me, I can help you, like I'm a warm person that you can come to with your problems, and then take advantage of people in their weaker moments.
And and both of them have access to kids. So unfortunately at this point I need to give a content warning for the rest of the podcast. We're going to be talking at length of both about pedophilia, grooming, and sexual assault for the rest of this podcast. So if that is not something that you are able to do,
we'll put a little timestamp because we'll talk about something else at the end. But
yes, and that will be in the description. So go ahead and take a look at that. Anyway, 3, 2, 1. Let's talk about the prison scene onward. Because oh boy,
man.
Poor Ellie. That. First of all, I just want to say, great acting from all
Oh my
parties.
God. We always praise Bella Ramsey, but this, I mean, I was like, the last episode was so good. This was on like another level. She's so great. I mean, oh man, he's so creepy. He does such a good job of being so creepy. And there's just to speak on like the female experience, it's funny because I was talking about this the other day with some people at work, where it's just like you're having a conversation with a guy and this just something switches on in you where you go, oh, like this person is not safe anymore and I have to watch my back and like something is wrong. Just this like inner feeling. And I mean, I could talk at length about like women not believing their intuition because we're kind of like told to be very polite and, oh, just give them a chance. So sometimes that intuition comes a little too late. But yeah, when he starts talking to her about it, and it's crazy because it's like such a great foil to the conversation she had with her like sergeant or whatever in the last episode, where it's like someone who's not a pedophile talking to a young girl who he thinks, who knows she's very smart, she has the ability to be a good leader, and he sees a lot of potential in her, in a not fucking creepy sexual way. So then you have this other conversation. So I'm sure like her experience is like, oh, like that's interesting. I'm having a similar conversation with this guy who sees something in me. And then she just that like, oh.
The second he puts.
That she says, he puts his hands on there. That really rang with me. I know any girl or woman watching this, you have had at least, hopefully it's a small number of times, but unfortunately probably not, where you're talking to a guy and you just go, oh no, like I'm in danger, like, ugh.
Yeah, and this scene, I feel like it's not as subtle as I feel like those experiences are in real life. And unfortunately, women have to deal with a large amount of sexual violence by men that precedes this. But I feel like for anyone that doesn't know, you can still relate to that feeling of realizing that something's off with someone. And this show, I feel like, had to do it much more obviously of like the second he puts his hand on hers. Because in my mind, a red flag went off the second that he put his hand on the cage.
And I think where the subtlety for this scene is coming is you're trying to gauge, is she gonna go along with this to see like if she can do a long con and get out? Because that's kind of, it kind of seems like where it might be going.
Yeah.
But of course that's just not Ellie. And, also like it's horrifying to be in the situation she's in So instead, she breaks his finger.
Which is fantastic. Also, I love that that's the moment where she gives him the name, because it's this... The thing about Ellie being violent and having a violent heart, I just want to say something. First of all, David is projecting so much onto her in that scene, but there's little nuggets of truth in there, which is the reason why the manipulation works. At least it appears to be working in the beginning until she hits that moment of like, oh no, this is a sexual predator, which I think is the moment where she actually turns. Because he's also doing things where he's admitting that things aren't going well because he knows that it's going to serve him to admit fault in that moment. Which is like, people that are manipulative and narcissistic will usually only admit fault when they see that it can gain them something. And he's like playbooking it like really perfectly in this scene. So with her giving him something that he's wanted the entire time, but only after she has taken something from him, i.e. his fingers, that's an exchange of power. And that's her asserting herself over him, which I think is like one of those things that does ring true to her. Now, an interesting thing that I kind of want to talk about a little bit is the idea that she is a born leader, because to my knowledge, I'm not sure if that becomes a thing in the second game. It doesn't seem like that's where we're going, because every time that we see Ellie, she's always alone and she's just with Joel. And to my knowledge of the sort of arc that she has in game 2, it seems like in the second game, she is much more in a lone wolf scenario through a lot of the game. But I could be wrong about that.
I mean, I think it's also like she just has the ability to step up to the plate when she has to, which is obviously the main quality of a leader. Like, it comes with her being a very like cunning, smart, witty person. Like the idea that she arms Joel, she moves something in front of the thing to give him more time, and she's going to lead these people away is not only I think that's like something of a leader where she's like, I'm taking control of this situation. Like, you know, it's only her and Joel, but she's protecting the pack. And yeah, I mean, that monologue where he says she has a violent heart, it's so interesting because it's like, she is violent, but it's out of necessity and like situationally, where, you know, obviously we don't know for sure that he molested kids when he was a teacher, but obviously it seems like he probably did. He is just a violent person because he gets pleasure out of causing other people pain and having power over them, which she does not, like she doesn't without reason.
Yeah. I feel like that is a big sort of takeaway that you could have from that is, what's the difference between a person who has the capacity for violence, who can be violent if they need to, versus a person who is violent? It's the
yeah, like someone who he loves it. He loves the power he has over people. He loves beating up on them verbally and physically. He's a sociopath.
Yeah. There was I forget the study, but it was done a really long time ago, and it may be somewhat debunked since. But there was a study saying that like sort of the brain chemistry and capabilities between people that like we call heroes, who are capable of stepping up to the plate in times of like extreme violence and like are capable of rushing into a burning building, have a lot of the same brain makeup and behavioral traits as sociopaths without the lack of empathy. And this is a really old study, so if I am misquoting something, please let me know in the comments. But the idea there is that you have someone that has the capacity for violence, someone who has the capacity for doing stuff that is extremely unpleasant and can be harmful to themselves, versus people that take pleasure in doing those things strictly for harming other people. And I feel like
it's funny you said that, because I was thinking this over, and I was like, Ellie's violent in the way that like if she grew up in a world like not post-apocalyptic, I could see her being like a firefighter, like somebody who is like going headfirst into a burning building, like, which, you know, then it's kind of like we're equating violence with bravery, because to be brave, you often have to face violent
Yeah.
situations.
Well, no, I think that's true because I think that in certain situations, people that are capable of violence um, will not know that they're capable of violence until they're put into a situation where they have to be. So, and again, the difference between capable of violence versus being a violent person becomes really apparent there because there's the people that take pleasure in killing animals and like will groom this behavior in themselves until they become a serial killer. And then there's the people that like find out like, oh, I can shoot someone if I need to protect someone, and I'm going to be able to do that. And you're only going to find that out in the moment. That's the crazy thing. Like, you don't know if you're capable of defending someone like that until it happens. And it doesn't matter if, like, you, like, oh, I grew up training in martial arts as, like, a sport or something. You're not going to know if you're actually capable of defending yourself or someone until it happens. And that's part of life. And Ellie, unfortunately, has grown up in a world where violence is kind of a part of existing.
Yeah.
And of course, this culminates in her rearranging this man's face with the goddamn butcher knife at the end of the episode, which...
Yeah, I mean, we come to kind of what I said earlier, where it's like, well, this is going to be a punishment. Like, you're not going to step in line. We're going to turn you into food because otherwise we don't have a use for you. And she's, again, very quick on her feet and says, I'm infected. And she bites David, which I don't know if it's ever explored, like, if she could infect someone. I would assume no. But that is very interesting.
I
don't think she can.
I don't think she can either because I do know that as she gets older, she has partners. So, like, obviously, any sort of relationship you have with someone like that, you're going to be exchanging bodily fluids. Obviously, that's not going to go well.
Yeah, I guess and her and Joel are, I'm sure, sharing the same water bottle.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, she's quick. She's thinking so quick on her feet to get not murdered,
Yeah.
to not get a cleaver to the neck, and is able to stop them for just a second. Also, shout out to Troy Baker, who is the original voice of Joel in the games and plays James in this scene in this episode.
Which, what a good voice to show how much people question David's authority the entire episode.
Yeah,
because like
he did a fantastic job.
Oh my god! In that final moment where it's like right before he catches the cleaver to the neck, and he's like, it's over. After Ellie's like, I'm infected, and then they see the bite mark and like how it sort of blistered out and became what it was, which the way that we have seen him throughout the entire episode, he was this perfect foil, and he's probably the person that, if David wasn't around, would actually be the leader. He's the good second in command. He actually has a good head on his shoulders, but he's been driven to these circumstances by David.
We get that kind of in the scene where everyone's eating. First of all, we also didn't touch on the fact that David has like an enormous plate compared to everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then James just like is so hesitant to eat. And his face the whole time is like, this is really messed up, man. Yeah, but he did a great job. Yeah. And then she, cleaver to the neck for James, and she gets out. And also, all I could think when he's walking around was in The Incredibles, when the villain is like, "You sly dog, you got me monologuing."
Yeah, no, I mean, she did it, and like, this is one of the situations where I fully believed the monologuing thing because
because he's crazed. He realizes like,
everything.
The jig is up, and also, I mean, I think he still thinks he can get away and be like, oh, she killed him, but I killed her or whatever.
Well,
but it's just them in that building now, so he can really let loose and be who he really is.
That's the part that really had me shaken down to my core because I'm not 100% sure that he was molesting people in his leadership position. But the second that he's like, no one else is here, the building's burning down, I might die, and he fully decides, I'm gonna try and rape this girl. And that was the
Yeah, I guess she wasn't convinced to be my wife from my 30-second talk, so I guess we'll just jump to the next thing.
yeah, it was really really bad. And I feel like part of that is because he thought that if he was going to die, that's what he was going to do. Like
Yeah.
the jig was up. He's probably not making it out of this. He got his second killed. The main building is now burning down. He didn't try to put out the fire. He just tried going after her. And he's let this girl essentially just tear a hole in his leadership and how the cult is going to see him after all this is done.
Yeah, I think a big difference between the games is like I feel like more in the games in this scene he feels like he's about to die, so he's like getting his last hurrah versus in this episode I feel like he is not convinced that she actually is infected, or he thinks like, oh shit, maybe she is, but like she's immune. So it to me it's almost scarier because he's like, he's not doing this because he's about to die. He's doing this because he's just like so enraged, and he's like, oh, I got you. Like it's just you and me now. And everybody else will believe my story when I get out of this.
There's two different reads on this scene, and I think that they're both valid. It seems like I read it the way that the game presented it, and you read it in a new light, which I will say your reading implies that he is so delusioned in himself and has such a god complex that it's like, oh, well, the woman that bit me must be immune. So
Well,
this little girl can't, like, must be so special.
Well, he says either you're not infected or you really are just that special.
Yeah. It was, like, the fact, but the thing that's scary is it's his ego that's allowing him to make that jump. It's not rationality. Like, a rational person would believe that his time is taken at that point. But
And he also says someone who's infected would not fight this hard.
which, yeah, I wonder if
I mean, I think either way, like that you read it is totally valid.
Yeah,
He's still being a scumbag.
he's awful. Also, the really horrible line as he's getting on top of her, because like there's a moment where it's like if he wanted to kill her, he could have. And
Yeah.
I think a really important thing is that David's ego and desire to essentially assault this little girl is what leads him to dying. Because there's so
Yes.
many times where he could have just gotten her. Like, Ellie was
Yeah, if
completely at
he
his
had just
mercy.
killed her, then he would stay alive. But he decides, I have to exert my power one more time, and that gives her the chance to kill him.
Yeah.
In the horrible, violent way that he deserves. Really wish he could have lived longer through it, probably, but
And I will say,
there's a fire happening, so like,
yeah, I will say the line that really like shook me to my core was like I enjoyed the struggle the most. Don't you know that? Because it's like this
yeah,
moment
where
of just,
I thought he said biting, but I think it's I like fighting the most.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, just like stomach curdling. It's so disgusting and really horrible. And yeah, it just shows you what he's really like
Yeah.
and what he has, you know, if this person got to live, this is what eventually he would be unleashing onto this group. Because
Yeah.
you got to slowly start being super horrible. But
it's
yeah, it's so brutal. And Bella Ramsey's screams as she's
my
looking
God.
into a face of, I mean, pure evil. This guy's pure evil.
Absolutely.
Like, she's already gotten that at this point, but like to see this up close is horrifying.
I will say there was a lot of catharsis in his, like, there was catharsis in the fact that we got to watch this rapist pedo get completely obliterated by Bella Ramsey with that and Ellie, moreover. We should be talking about the character with this, but completely obliterated by Ellie with that cleaver. But at the same time, I felt absolute terror for Ellie in realizing what she just endured. And like the way that she delivered the performance of the actual scream as she's doing it, the like you can just tell that this is a moment where, ultimately speaking, though, even though she got out of it, she's still lost. Like, a part of her
Yeah.
has been completely taken away. She's completely traumatized. She's now a survivor of sexual assault, which I will say, as far as television using very real trauma as storytelling devices, I feel like this is one of the ones where I'm less mad because the entire plot of the show is about surviving trauma, and how surviving trauma informs the way that we love others. And this is a show where it thematically makes sense to have a survivor of sexual assault as a main character. Which like and this is an instance where I'm very okay with because it's very thematic to the show, where other television shows will kind of thrust it in there and make it be like, we did not need to explore this element of trauma. Like, I don't think
Yeah,
that
and
this is appropriate.
obviously we get some pretty immediate karma and satisfaction on the viewer's end. So
Yes.
that helps a little bit as well.
I can never exploring trauma like this is such a delicate thing to do because there's something about sexual assault where it's a different animal than just exploring death, because the crime itself is so much more personal than just being killed, that like looking through this, and there's a reason why we have a trigger warning for this episode and a content warning overall, is this is something that like will drive up someone's PTSD very, very quickly.
Yeah, I
Upon
mean it's not just like this guy sexually assaulting her. He's proposing that she become his literal child bride.
Yeah, it's
Become like an indentured servant sex slave because she's 14. It's
yeah.
I like you're saying this show doesn't want to be horror, but to me that's some fucking horror shit right there.
I will say, it's so funny because the definition of horror is so strange as a genre. Because I agree that this is horrifying. But the genre of horror, I feel like always kind of, and this we can like have other conversations about like how this might be from the Academy, because this would get classified as thriller for plot reasons in any other situation. I mean, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo explores all the same themes that we're talking about right now,
Yes.
but will be classified as thriller, even though there's some blood-curdling scenes in the book in the original movie. I haven't seen the most recent version of it, but the original Swedish film is all full of exploring what a survivor of sexual assault looks like and the revenge that takes, and how revenge in those situations isn't necessarily it may have some catharsis, but it doesn't actually solve the situation. This is also a
Yeah.
conversation that you have about
Obviously
Berserk.
Ellie, like she killed him, but Ellie is worse off than, when
Yeah.
she started.
The
I also another winter cult Riley Keough movie, The Cabin, kind of explores some of those themes. I love that movie. It was also, unfortunately, the last movie I saw in theaters before the pandemic started, and it's about being stuck inside of a cabin.
no.
So that was a little rough. That movie is brutal, and
Yeah.
it's really good. Also, what's her name from Clueless? Sarah, not Silverman.
Definitely not a Sarah Silverman
Not Sarah
role.
Silverman. Oh, here, let me look this up.
Unfortunately, I feel like there's a joke to be made about her time on Louis, unfortunately, for that, but that's
Alicia Silver. So, also Alicia Silverstone has a small part in that movie that is, I mean, it's not a comedic part. So,
Ugh.
if you want more cult slash winter content, I would highly recommend that movie.
Yeah. I will say this entire scene and execution and the way that David is important to Ellie's character was just done incredibly well. We're going to move away from talking super on the nose about sexual assault now, but just be warned, there will still be some minor touch-ups upon it most likely, because we're gonna have to talk about the differences between Joel and David as a father figure and sort of that
Yeah.
foil at the end.
Oh man. That penicillin be bussin'.
Oh my gosh, he just got up. He was ready to go. Like he was fully like, okay, I'm awake now. It's time to kill people. I
Yeah, it
need
doesn't
my
matter
daughter.
that it seems like he hasn't drank water in 5 days, but man, that interrogation scene was so good because we haven't really gotten to see this real side of Joel, which is like they kind of just people talk about like, oh, this is what he used to be like, this is what he used to do. Tess talks about like this is what they used to do. But we haven't gotten to see that. So this is just like a little taste of how he used to be, and it is so good.
Oh my
Oh man.
the knife to the kneecap thing. The second I saw that, I'm just like, oh no, he's going full blown, like he's not fucking around right now. And
It's so bad. Oh man. And then when he's like tells the guy,
it's okay, I believe
it's okay, I believe him. That was just like a man, insert like guitar riff here. Like I was like, this is so badass.
He's yeah, Pedro Pascal for any sort of action role, daddy role, he got it. He's been he painfully is aware of what the internet thinks of him right now as far as being
I know.
daddy
Good
is
Lord.
concerned.
Let's leave the man alone for a little bit.
I think he enjoys it. He's totally about it. But yeah, speaking of,
Yeah, and it just kind of shows like this is what, Ellie could have left him and she didn't, and she went to great lengths to help him get better, and that he'll never forget that, and he knows how important that was and how big of a deal that is to her. So this is like they're ride or die now. They've been ride or die before, but this is just a new level. So he is willing to do whatever he needs to do to get her back.
yeah.
And they talk about it in the post episode where it's like you're hoping the whole time that Joel's going to come in and save the day, and Ellie actually has to save herself, but he's there for her when she kind of just stumbles out of that building.
Oh my god,
and delivers one of the most devastating lines I've ever heard. It's like, okay, I got you, baby girl.
Yeah, he hasn't called anyone that. And this is the moment fully where they acknowledge their relationship together of like surrogate father, surrogate child, just adopting their way into each other, and it's so good. And it's one of the reasons why I like this portrayal is he is there when she needs her after that, not to physically save her, but emotionally, because there's other media that will explore this idea of what happens when that person isn't there. What happens when you explore all that trauma and then you have to find your way to be emotionally vulnerable again. And immediately she walks out of that horribly traumatizing situation, something that is going to forever change her, and her dad's there to be like, it's okay. It's okay.
And he's made it very clear through the whole series that like what she has to endure is so unfair and just like unimaginable for a kid her age to have to experience. And he, she doesn't really say what happens, but obviously he gets the gist. Also, Bella Ramsey's eyes when she's looking at him, I was like, these look drawn on. They are like so big and round. I mean, I don't even understand how she did that with her eyes.
1,000-yard stare.
They are so. I was just like really blown away by that.
And I feel like as far as, because we don't really get a lot of Joel throughout the episode. We just get him when he's in rampage mode, which is not the kindest image to see of him, but it is badass as fuck, and we know that he's doing it to save his daughter. But like the entire time we've been having this idea of Father David, and it's very choice words for him to be considered father, not just on a religious text. But
Yeah.
he also weirdly, sickly sees his relationship to what he wants from Ellie to simultaneously be her father and be her lover, which is not good. And I think that is something that's hinted at with the girl in the beginning of the episode as well, because he makes it clear that she will always have a father. That scene in hindsight is so gross.
Yeah, it is so creepy. But yeah, they kind of serve as a foil for each other, and somebody who is willing to use that, like, that relationship of like a father and daughter to his sick advantage versus somebody who is taking that on as like just like
a responsibility.
Something that's so important. Yeah, it's something that's so important and taking it so seriously, and the like pure love that is involved with that relationship.
Yeah, and I think there's something to say about because kids don't know what their relationship with their parental figures or guardians are supposed to be like. And it's very easy for someone that is in a position of authority, including fathers, to abuse that power, whether or not it's via neglect, via verbal abuse, via physical abuse. It's always possible, and kids aren't going to have any expectations on how to deal with that. But meanwhile, I think one of the things that kind of gets Ellie through this is she knows what a real dad is supposed to look like. And she knows it through Joel. Like,
yeah, and that she'll be able to lean on him. He kind of she took care of him, and now it's gonna be his turn to take care of her.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see the next episode, and like now that it feels like their relationship has fully culminated, and unfortunately the end of the episode is an odd number, which means we gonna cry, guys. We've established this on the podcast. Odd numbers.
You're gonna feel a lot of things.
I know it's going to be sad. I know it's going to be upsetting. I am really hoping that it is overall a happy ending,
it's going to be mostly really upsetting for many reasons.
Well, I'm hoping... hey, if it ends where the game is, then that means that we should be in a good spot. It's however the game ends. And I'm pretty sure that the game itself was originally designed to be a closed story. And the episode 2... and The Last of Us 2 was a continuation. That's my knowledge. Let me know if I was correct on that. But yeah, I think we're just going to have to see where the next one is.
Yeah. All right. I'm excited. I'm excited and sad.
Also,
I'm sad that it's ending because I really could watch I could watch so much more of
same.
this.
And we know that the second season isn't even in development right now. I think that they're going to be giving it some time because it seems like the third game is in development based on some rumors right now. And they'll probably announce it once the next episode comes out. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It seems like we're going to be getting a lot more Last of Us in the future, just not anytime soon. So there's going to be a big wait. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, I really hope Craig Mazin continues to crank out these shows because, like I said in maybe the first episode, he was the creator of Chernobyl, which I think is perhaps one of the best miniseries ever made. I think that's one of the best, just like TV show, movie, whatever piece of media to come out of the past decade. And Last of Us is really going up there on my list as well. So I'm extremely excited to see what other projects he comes out with because those have been, just absolute knocks out of the park for me.
Absolutely. Craig Mazin, this is a warning. Make more shows. It's a requirement now. We demand it of you. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Please leave a review and let us know what else you want us to cover. Anyway, we'll see you next week. This has been The Return of the Show.
Bye.
Bye-bye.